Untie him and let him go. This gospel is so rich and got many layers to it. It's important to break open a little bit. But one of the things that this gospel has always bothered me is when he hears the story that his friend Lazarus is ill, his response is to stay 2 more days. And there's it's deeply disturbing. Why is it that he doesn't come to rescue his friend? After all, he had the power to do this. So why does he not rescue his friend? He chooses to stay there to not rescue. And of course, this becomes a theme in John's gospel, that God does not rescue us. He redeems us. He does not even rescue Christ, his own son, from the cross. He redeems him through the cross. And we have to unpack what this really means for us and what it is that Jesus does and what he does not do. He does not go, but what he does do, he waits and then he goes, and what he does is so important. Ron Rolheiser, the great Catholic priest and theologian, breaks this open and says there's 2 distinct movements here that are very important to highlight. One is to see what Jesus does in response to this, that he goes to them, he shows up, he arrives, and then he enters in. Then the second part is that Jesus enters into our suffering. He does not redeem us. He does not rescue us. He redeems us from us, but he enters into our suffering. So, and again, that might not seem all that big, but that's pretty important. As God became one of us, he enters into our condition, and he becomes one of us to show us the way through this life. And that means he doesn't take away all our suffering. He doesn't take away all our pain, but shows us how to be with each other in that. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means that when Jesus comes to, he comes to his friend Lazarus, Mary and Martha, the sisters of Lazarus, and he shows up in their pain, and he weeps when they weep, and he is sad when they are sad. Now, and then he calls him forward and ties him, lets him go. What does that ultimately mean for us? It means that the Lord comes to us and will show up in our time. But how he shows up is up to you and I. He shows up when you and I show up. Because he has no hands and no feet in this world except yours and mine. So when our relatives are struggling and are sick, it's you and I that have to show up. It's you and I have to be there to be the hands and the feet of Christ. To not rescue them, to not take away their suffering, because we don't have that power. But what we can be is that we can show up and be present to them in the midst of their suffering, in the midst of their pain. Now, at least that sounds so easy. Let me tell you, it's hard. Because when our loved ones suffer, I do believe this, that it's harder to watch our loved ones suffer than it is to suffer ourselves. I really do believe that. That when our parents or our grandparents or our spouse or God forbid even our child is sick and even worse, dying, we want to solve it. We want to take away their pain. We want to take away their suffering, but we do not have the power. But what we can do in that difficult moment is be present to them in their suffering. Be present to them in the midst of their pain. And understand that requires of us a certain amount of centeredness. It requires of us a certain calmness in our own spirit, that we can sit with them and maybe hold their hand or just simply gently touch them with no need for words, just a loving presence. I promise you that makes all the difference in the world. You might remember several years ago, my brother Paul was dying of pancreatic cancer. And I remember how difficult it was to be present to him in the midst of suffering. The challenge was that when he came to me first, right when he got the diagnosis and the result, and we knew how bad it was, I knew how bad it would get. He did not. I've been down this journey with many other people who have died of pancreatic cancer. So I knew what the road ahead was. And so he asked me, will you tell me what is ahead? I said, I'll tell you what is ahead as long as you want to know it. And so every now and then he'd ask a difficult question, a difficult moment. He would say, like I remember him asking, when things were getting particularly bad, will I make Christmas? I said, no, you will not make Christmas. Will I make my birthday in the early December? No. Will I make Thanksgiving? I said, depends if you want to. That's going to be up to you and how much fight you have left. Your body is broken down. You've got nothing else left. He did make Thanksgiving, but that was the only thing he did. But all I could do was show up. I had no control. I couldn't take away his suffering as much as I wanted to. I wish I could take away the pain that his family was experiencing. I could not. But what I could do is be there and to hold his hand like I did that last night for endless hours until he was comfortable to say goodbye. My friends, it is important for us to know the power of presence, of showing up in the difficult moments of people's lives. It doesn't have to be the end of their life. The difficult moments, the transitions, the painful times when we doubt ourselves, when we struggle and we wonder, can we make this moment? And we often cannot change things for them. But what we can do is to be there for them. That is what it means to be a fully alive Christian in our world today. Today, more than ever, we need to be people who are willing to show up. To show up and to not save people, not to rescue them, but to be present to them in the midst of their suffering. Whether it be from a divorce, or whether it be from a rejection of their family because they are a part of the LGBT community, or whether they are immigrants and they feel no longer welcomed, or whether they have a multitude of other places where they feel left out on the sides of society. Our job is to show up, to show the loving presence of God to them. Today we will have the third scrutiny for the elect, where we'll pray upon them and ask the Lord to give them particular insight, but not only to them, but also for us, that we know the power of presence, that we turn away from our previous lives and be refreshed and renewed in the journey of Christ. So as we hear these words for them, let us also hear the words for ourselves, that we are called to be alive in Christ and to show up for people's painful moments of life.